Good afternoon, everyone. I'm calling to order the virtual committee of a whole meeting today, June 5th, 2025. The meeting is being recorded and viewed via HPA-TV.org, HPA-TV YouTube channel. There is only one item on the agenda, a presentation on the City Hall Master Plan commissioned by Majority Leader Rossetti. Majority Leader, tell us how this came about and please introduce the presenters. Thank you.
Thank you. So, back, previous administration, last budget of that administration, don't ask me what the year would be. Paul might be able to say what it is. I presented a recommendation, I guess, during financials to the mayor, present mayor, then Mayor Bronin. Um, and to give you background, so we love our city hall. And I've been sitting in a seat at council off and on, as my council president knows, and others, off and on for 20 something years. And as I sat there on that, last council, I kind of looked around and I thought, we're at a tipping point here with our building, and we probably have opportunities to go after funding, maybe, but we also need to know what the priorities are, what we need to do to the building, how, what that means, what should come first, and we need someone to help us do that. So I presented to the mayor my thoughts on that, and we put aside, I believe, Paul, it was $250,000
Yes.
to start that process, because we can't even start a process, as everyone knows, unless you have a plan. And what was that plan going to be? And what were we going to prioritize? And we also knew, and everyone knows, it's an old building. And once we started to do that, it was going to be a domino effect. If you do this, then you're going to have to meet this criteria around fire safety. And so we want to look to our building as the treasure that it is. And this is the start of the plan to which we will get to at some point. From what the priorities are, how we would move people, what needs to happen, certainly this is just the beginning of a very long process that's going to be very expensive. But we could now at some point say to our colleagues at the state, or funders or philanthropists, this is what will get this building from this to that. And that's kind of why we're here today. And I've been working with Paul off and on, and mentioning it to others to get to this point. And I'm really pleased that we're here today and we're able to do this. So
Before we continue, Majority Leader, I just want to introduce all the council members who are
yep.
present with us. We have, of course, you, Majority Leader Rossetti. We have Councilwoman Rosado. We also have Councilwoman Billadu. We also have Councilman John Gale and Councilman Thomas here at the meeting. So I would say we do have a quorum.
Yeah.
So, Majority Leader, continue, please.
So Paul, I don't know if anybody, why don't we do questions at the end, if that's okay with everybody? And then, Paul, I don't know if you want to then kick it off with the team, or
Certainly.
there's something more, because
Thank
this is your
you.
last opportunity, Paul, so go with it.
So thank you, Councilwoman Rossetti, and through you, Chair Surgeon. Thank you all for being here on a very hot afternoon. Back in fiscal year 24, as Councilwoman Rossetti had stated, she had set aside some money, the administration through budget set aside some money, and this office was charged with seeing what it would take to bring this building back to its former glory and bring it up to the standards to which government operates currently. So with that, we had early meetings with Councilwoman Rossetti and the project team with us today. Everyone is Jeff Wyszynski from Tecton Architects. I'll have him present a really thorough report. And Jeff, when you do, before you start your presentation, if you can really have this committee understand the level of effort you and our project manager, Nasha Roan from DPW, went through to get to this point to present to this committee. And with that, Chair Surgeon, I was hoping to have Mr. Wozinski to present, if that's okay with you.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay. Jeff?
Great. Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Wozinski. I'm a principal at Tecton Architects. With me today from the Tecton team is Paul Terrell. He's a senior project manager at Tecton, and Nina Lipinski, a senior project manager as well, but focused on interior design. I am going to share my screen here. And if you could tell me, can you see a blue
Yes.
screen in
Yes,
front
we
of you?
can.
All right, perfect. All right, so we've prepared about a 20 or so, 25-minute presentation, summary presentation over the various different aspects of our work, the approach to the work that we took, talk a little bit about the extended team and their expertise, and also go over basically the detailed projected costs and overall schedule. So I'd first like to start with the goal of the project, as Councilwoman Rossetti had mentioned. Our goal was really to look at this building and restore it to its original grandeur and develop a comprehensive master plan for the city and municipal offices to serve the community for generations to come. So this is big picture thinking, master planning, making sure that we left no stone unturned. And the components of our work, there were three main components. The first component was the existing conditions analysis, collecting the information, gathering it all the drawings, all the documentation, walking through the buildings, scanning the buildings, understanding every square inch of this building, and writing up an assessment on the existing conditions. Coupled with that, Nina and her team spent a fair amount of time looking at the space needs, the programmatic aspect, who's in the building now as far as the departments, and how might they be affected by this comprehensive renovation. So we've included that, and then collected both of these components and developed an overall master plan that's been worked into a final report. So just before we begin into our actual work, just a little bit about Tecton. We've been dedicated to the city of Hartford for 30 plus years. We know the city well. We're very vested in our community through the various different organizations along the bottom that we participate in, but also have completed several different types of work, whether it be schools, complex renovations, office renovations in the city of Hartford. And we really thrive on the work that and the relationship that we have with the city. So our team went beyond just Tecton. It was a comprehensive team. So we looked at all aspects of the project. So we led the overall architectural and interior components, but we also hired a national expertise, a company called BCA, their expertise in historic preservation. We worked with them. We worked with them on the preservation and development of a master plan for the state capitol building. We worked with them on the old historic state house as well. So great expertise when it comes to historical preservation, understanding the complexity of those components and how we might be able to identify various different grants as you decide to move forward. The other team members were Michael Horton Associates, structural. So we had a structural engineer do a complete assessment, walking through the building, looking at the drawings from a structural component. We had a company called BL Companies, locally based, Hartford, that looked at all the various different building systems, meaning the mechanical systems, the electrical systems, fire protection, fire alarm, all of the building systems that are in the building today, document them, and then propose recommendations for improvements to those systems. Eagle Environmental, they looked at all the, we'll call it building environmental, building and site environmental, all hazardous materials, understanding what areas of the building. This often becomes a component that becomes, it's very detailed and intricate, and we want to make sure that we scoped, we understood what's in the building and analyzed it, documented it, and costed it. So hazardous materials was led by Eagle Environmental. And then lastly, when we collected all of this information, we have an independent cost estimator, and it's the same cost estimator that just completed the detailed cost estimates for the state capitol building. So that state capitol building, I have a few slides, I'll show you the scope of work. So we thought it was most prudent to use these consultants, this team, because they're familiar with this type of work. So again, just a comprehensive team looking at the overall building and site. So just real quickly, similar project-related experience. You'll see on the slide here, the historical State House. We do a lot of work with the judicial system and the historic preservation of their court system. So we're very familiar with buildings of that vintage. And then BCA's nationally completed work at the United States Capitol, Massachusetts, and the Boston Public Library. So you have the right team, you have the right expertise. They know these types of buildings in and out. Specifically, the State Capitol building, this project is well underway. It's already been funded through the state legislature, and they're only looking at the exterior preservation of this building, but the overall total project cost for that was about $55 million. And all of it, this project started with a very similar master planning report and documentation that Councilwoman Rossetti proposed, and we conducted and completed. So this is a snapshot of that report. Our report for the City Hall, Hartford City Hall, is set up in a very similar way. We coordinated with the various different disciplines, but also SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, as well. So again, similar type of scope of work where it's the exterior preservation, scanning and digitally documenting the existing conditions of the building. So we have a digital twin of the building was another component that's similar to what we did for you folks for the city of Hartford. So a good, recent, relevant experience. The documentation and the structure was very much the same. So we continued in that structure and format for the Hartford City Hall. And just a second example real quick, just an adaptive reuse of a historic building where we took an old, the Litchfield Courthouse, added to it, created all, complied with all the current building codes, but also accessibility in addition to the building as well. So again, another example of where we worked with the local historic commission, but also the state historic commission on both possible grants, but also approvals as well. So now to your specific project. So Hartford City Hall was designed by Davis and Brooks back in 1911. Actually, it was part of a competition where they won the commission. And it took about 2 years to build the building overall. It was an extension of the Wadsworth property, and the building was dedicated in November 4th in 1915. So we're talking about a building that hasn't really seen all that much renovation over about 110 years. So it's really lasted the test of time. It's a beautiful building, ornate detailing, something that we really want to make sure that we preserve. As I mentioned, for the state Capitol building, we basically scanned both the exterior and all levels of the existing Hartford City Hall so that we had what's called a digital twin. We have a digital scan of the building, both exterior and interior. Why is this important? It's very important when it comes to if you decide to go to the next step and preserve the building and proceed with detailed documents. This provides a digital model for those designers to utilize, but it also gives the city of Hartford a good database to use as you move forward. It gives you the size of various different components of the building, but also the condition of the materials. So we did the exact same thing for the interior, all 4 levels, and the city will have access to all of these as well. And you can see where believe it or not, it creates areas for you. You can measure from the system. You can apply various different materials to it. So it becomes a very good digital catalog for the team as they move forward. But you can look at every aspect of the building, understand the condition. This is great for contractors as well when you get to that phase for them understanding the scope of work. So the contents of our report have 9 total sections. And the total consolidation of the report includes 970 pages of documentation of the existing conditions and proposed recommendations, along with all the photo documentation and graphic documentation. So it's all in one place. The 9 sections of the report, including, or in addition to the executive summary, we looked at the site work around the building, We looked at the building exterior. We looked at the architectural interior portions of the building. Then we looked at, specifically, we looked at the code compliance, meaning accessibility code, life safety code, building and fire code. Then we looked at the building systems. So all the fire protection, mechanical, all those components related to building systems infrastructure is documented in section 5. Again, structural restoration in section 6, and then the hazardous materials in section 7, and then it's all summarized in a cost estimate, a very detailed delineated cost estimate. And then we've also included, lastly, an appendix that collects all of the documentation we were so fortunate to collect overall, and that you had as a good starting point. And I should say, without going any further, it was a tremendous amount of work, and I really thank Paul's team, Paul and his team, Nasha and Julia, spent an awful lot of time with us, helping us get all the information we needed, getting access to the building. So this effort had several different people involved, and it was a group effort overall to get this information together. So more specifically to your building, this slide shows an area summary table. So there's more or less 4 usable floors of the building, a basement and a sub-basement. But when you add all that square footage up, the building's about 131,000 square feet. And that's an important kind of statistical piece of information, because that directly applies to kind of some of the construction costs as we move through the presentation. So I'm going to walk you through just a high-level kind of summary of each of the sections. So first, we're going to start with the site work and modifications and any kind of restorations related to it. So when we're talking about a comprehensive approach and report, we're talking about everything from the exterior all the way through to the interior of the building. And so from a site perspective, we looked at, obviously, the landscaping. There's a lot of different various window wells, paver and curbs, plazas that need to be restored, water fountains and maintenance and various utilities related to that. And then the obvious one is the accessibility into the building with the steps, the conditions of the steps, and how we restore those and provide accessibility from the site perspective. So all of those components are worked into those sections of the site narrative. The second section of the report includes the building exterior restoration, and as you can imagine, we broke this into some subcategories, and the largest of which is the masonry, right? The articulation of ornate nature of the articulation of this facade and all the detail accompanied with it is included in that section of the report. We then focused on the ornamental elements like the copper flashings and gutters and details. And then lastly, looked at the windows, the wood windows would essentially be removed, restored, and reinstalled, something that SHPO was very familiar with and happy with. So incidentally, Tecton and BCA collectively have a great working relationship with the State Historic, so we understand what they look for as far as the extent of the renovation and preservation and what materials they'll accept. So there's a more detailed list on this slide that shows, restoration of stone facade, windows, metal elements, obviously all the steel detailing, but from an exterior restoration perspective, it's the walls, it's the windows, it's the roofs, it's the entire building envelope that's covered in this section. Once complete with the exterior, we then looked at the interior restoration of the building. And as you can imagine, many of these areas have been, have evolved in use over time. And you're making best use of the building with your current department kind of configurations. When we talk about the restoration on the interior, a significant impact of that is the hazardous or asbestos abatement removal of various different components like the plaster, for example. So removing those components and restoring those components back to the original design takes a fair amount of work, kind of pulling and peeling back the finishes and surfaces of the floors, walls, and ceilings, and then putting all of those materials back. So that's kind of exactly what this section of the report describes. And then Nina Lipinski, the other manager on our team, spent time with Nasha and the department's understanding what impact that may have on the existing departments. The idea behind the preservation and renovation of this building would be that you would move all of the occupants completely out of the building into either a leased space or a space that the city owns for a period of about 18 to 24 months. So all of that documentation, the logistics, and who would need what size space, all of that's covered in both the programming and the move summary portions of our report. So again, we tried to be as comprehensive as possible. Along with all the narratives in the report are accompanying graphic diagrams. So this graphic diagram that you see on your screen is a simple way to understand the various different floor finish narrative replacements. Basically, it describes the areas of the various different floor finishes and to the extent that we would renovate them. So it's an easy way for somebody that doesn't want to look through the narrative to look at this plan and understand what areas are going to be affected and renovated and preserved. In a similar fashion, for those that would be disrupted because of this renovation, and keep in mind when we introduce new contemporary building systems like fresh air, air conditioning, heating, ventilating and cooling, we need what's called vertical shafts through the buildings that take up some floor space that will impact some of these programmatic areas. So that analysis was completed by Nina in our office and in close coordination with Nasha, just to make sure we understood the impacts that may have on their usable space. And these are graphic illustrations of that. Lastly, in the interior, architectural interior restoration portion is the atrium restoration scope. Obviously, this is the crown jewel of the building, right? The natural daylight diffusing down all 4 levels through glass block in a fantastic glass skylight. We wanted to make sure we understood the extent of the restoration of all the various different granite, the restoration of all the railings, the ornate metal work that's related to both the railings, but also the elevators, and then certainly the lighting fixtures as well. So again, making sure we were looking at every detail component in the building and making sure that that's in the scope from a restoration perspective. I mentioned code and ADA or accessibility before. Our team Tecton has the privilege of an in-house building official. So they coordinated with both the fire marshal and the local building inspector to make sure we understood the existing code-related items or concerns related to those 2 departments, both fire and building. And the far right side of this slide just is an example. It's a snippet of a letter that we've coordinated both life safety, egress, and building code related items and documented those back to the building official and the fire marshal to make sure everybody's on the same page. So when you move forward with the project, people are well informed of what this scope is. So again, thank you to them for spending some time looking through the documentation that we provided to them. It was very important to get their buy-in, their ability to look at the information that we provided. So from an accessibility perspective, we want to make sure all the offices, all the public areas, this is a public building. There's a lot of public facing departments. We want to make sure that we give equal opportunity and access to all of these spaces from an accessibility perspective. So that list, and I won't go over it, addresses all of the various different components of the building when it comes to accessibility, making sure that any individual from the community has access to all the various different public facing spaces. Section 5 is a pretty significant section in the report, which covers the building system. So again, I mentioned mechanical, electrical, plumbing, modifications, fire protection, and fire alarm. And the reason why these are important, because if you think back when this building was built, those systems are far more simplified than they are today. And one of the key components when we start looking at the detail is we obviously need the proper fresh air for the individuals that both work in the building, but also the community members that visit the building. We need to make sure that it's properly tempered, both heating and air conditioning. And then we need to make sure the electrical systems support a contemporary office building. So all of those components, all the sub panels, all the service entrance, utility service entrances, BL companies took a team of engineers, walked through the building, analyzed it, and described in great detail all of these various different systems. And as you can imagine, most of their recommendations were to introduce new systems that address all of the building code related items, such as fresh air and proper lighting, lighting control. What's important here to keep in mind is the proposed recommendations or the proposed systems are all electric, so that it sets this building up in the city so that typically in more contemporary buildings, the buildings are electrified because that is the most sustainable way from a renewable energy perspective. So should the community decide to look at PV or green energy, this building, this property can be set up for that. Structural restoration. So having a structural engineer walk through a 110-year-old building sometimes gives you a little bit of concern, but the good news is that their first statement was that in their opinion, the Hartford City Hall is structurally sound. So that's fantastic news. There's obviously areas of the building that need to be addressed from kind of a building envelope. If you don't address the water coming into the building in a timely fashion, it starts to deteriorate your building faster, which then leads to some structural concerns. So they've identified some areas, some minor areas on the 4th and 3rd floor that should be addressed in relatively short order, just to preserve the long-term integrity of the structural system of the building. So this is all good news. The other piece that we had the structural engineer look at was making sure when we introduce new building systems, that comes with a lot of big pieces of equipment, right? And that equipment can be pretty heavy. So we modeled, we sized, generally speaking, at this phase, mechanical units, and we had the structural engineer look at those areas of the building to make sure that those could be accommodated. So again, taking a comprehensive look at the structural piece of the building. The last real building component was the environmental piece. And I mentioned just due to the age and vintage of the building, you are going to see these kinds of things. And this isn't uncommon to many of the buildings and projects that you go through in the city, whether it be a school or a municipal project. There's asbestos containing materials. There's nothing dangerous about the existing condition right now. The challenge is when you start renovating a building, you really should remediate it. So that's what we did. We followed best practices, industry standard best practices for things like asbestos containing material, lead-based paint, and any kind of suspected PCB materials. All of that would be remediated. So when you're finished with this project, you have a completely clean building from a hazardous or environmental materials perspective. Just a few photos of kind of the conditions on the left side. If those haven't had the opportunity to walk through some of the, I guess, the more private areas of the building, the left side shows the interstitial space between the glass atrium ceiling in the atrium and the skylight above. Just really, I mean, for an architect, it's just a really great building to walk through and see. But again, just well built, well preserved, well taken care of from a maintenance perspective. Is just when you get a building that's of about 110 years old, you really need to start looking at restoring it to its grandeur. So these photos just represent, various different access points to mechanical systems. The center of your screen is some of the accessibility challenges that we've identified if you want to use things like more of the 4th floor. So we've included that in your report as well. And then obviously some of the chambers and identifying making sure that we have the proper occupant loads when it comes to building safety, egress, those kinds of components. All of that was studied and is included in the report. So I'm not going to bore you going through what's in the appendix. I guess what's important about section 9 is that all the information that was given to us, and believe me, it was hundreds of thousands of pages, has been all organized, cataloged, and in a very succinct and organized way, so that when you move to that next phase of the project, all of this digital library. It's all scanned digitally. The city has all of this information in one spot. So it's all organized, it's all bookmarked, so that it should streamline anybody's effort as you move to the future phases. So getting to the real heart of the matter, which is the projected costs and the schedule. I'm going to show you a progressive approach to the costing. And the reason why I say that is because there's two main components when you're considering a project, right? There's construction costs and there's soft costs. And what you always want to talk to is a number using total project costs. So anything, what is it going to take to deliver the project in totality? And that's what we summarized in the next series of slides. Section 8. So this slide here is what we'll call construction costs. There's subcontract construction costs. So if we put this project out, and often days a project like this would go a construction manager at risk delivery, they would put out various different bid packages. The bid packages would be something like what you see on your screen. We'd break the work into site work. So a bunch of site subcontractors would bid those components, building envelope, building interior. So you'd see all these various different bid packages and components. So that construction cost, those hard construction costs, total about $76 million. When you then apply the rest of the related construction costs, so then you have to have somebody that manages and oversees all of these subcontractors. They have to have insurance, they have to have trailers, they have to have separation, they have to have all the site logistics, all the related items to make sure that the project is done well, done safely, and done appropriately. The overall construction comes up to about $92 million, $92.6 million for the total construction costs. So that's one component of your total project cost, right? And that's around $700, $707 a square foot. And if you look at other projects that you're conducting across the city, that's pretty much in a range where you would expect to see some complex either addition renovations or preservations. So it's a number that we believe is right in the middle of the market for this type of work. Now, when you start adding the soft costs, which is this green section here, so you have to have somebody design and detail it. The city will often hire an owner's project manager just because, Paul, Nasha, Julia, and team, they have all their other responsibilities. You typically hire an owner's project manager to be that day-to-day eyes and ears for the owner. There's a cost related to that. And then there's other soft costs, like as I mentioned at the onset, we want to make sure we're comprehensive in our approach. There's going to be a complete move out of this building and a complete move back into this building. Those costs have to be covered somewhere. That's where we've covered them here in the soft costs. So you have move costs, you have a temporary move and fit out allowance. And then when you move back into the building, you're going to have to make sure that there's new tables and chairs, appropriate, accessibility compliant furniture. So we've identified those as well. So when you add the soft costs to the hard costs, you're now at $113 million, today's construction cost. And then this is the last slide. I promise I won't add any more costs to you, but when you take the 113 million.
Yes, please stop adding costs. Please stop.
When you take the 113 million, that's today's costs. And I think everybody's familiar, unfortunately or fortunately, with a term called escalation. We think you're probably not going to start construction within 3 to 4 years. So we've provided an escalation of about 4.25% of construction at 3 years, which is about 18%. This is where the number gets larger quickly because on average, a historical industry standard pretty much across the market, all markets, you're talking anywhere from 4 to 5% for a yearly escalation to construction. So when you compound that, it ends up being around 18%. So that's an eye-popping number, but it's a number that, you know, we believe you need to carry if you're going to need to take some time to go raise some money. And then the last component is really just to make sure that there's a safety and contingency. And this, again, is pretty much an industry standard at this phase. Because you don't have drawings, because you don't know everything that you're going to do for this project, you carry a contingency, a design contingency, and that's around 10 to 12%. We've included it there. So it gets you to a total project cost of about $1,145 a square foot. When you compare it to comparable projects of similar size scope, we think you're right in that range. So we haven't overescalated for the Taj Mahal. We haven't underestimated and have missed things. Our goal is to give you a very good, responsible number to use from a planning perspective. So there's probably 24 pages of estimate detail that backs up all these numbers, but that's a summary of kind of where we are today. And the last slide and then I'll stop and take any questions that you may have, is the schedule. So where we are today is we're pretty much at the end of Q2. We're moving into Q3 for 2025. So the purple is we've completed the master plan. Let's say you spend the next year or so, maybe year and a half, looking at various different grants, both federal, state, start talking to the legislature about funding this and preserving this. I think it's a statewide, it's a national asset that needs to be preserved. Try to gain the support. So let's say that takes a year, and then you begin your design process. Your design is probably about a year and a half or so. So that puts you towards the end of 2027. So if people are in the building and they're listening in City Hall and this project does go ahead, you don't have to move out tomorrow. You probably wouldn't move out until somewhere in the end of 2027, early 28 during the bid. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're talking about 2 years of preservation renovation, putting you at a proposed completion of somewhere around 2030. And that's, you know, if we stay on a somewhat, I guess, aggressive schedule here. So could this be accelerated? Yes. Could it be extended? Yes. It's just gives you an idea of how much time this may take to deliver a project like this. And with that, I thank you very much for the opportunity to present, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Jeffrey, thank you so very much. I've got to digest $150 million first, though. And Marilyn, thank you for the foresight of thinking about this. We've been in this building for the last 20 plus years. So yes, this was certainly needed, but $150 million is something I got to wrap my brains about. But in the meantime, though, one of the things I would ask is one of the things I've seen over decades with the city, we do these great reports and nobody knows where they are. So love to see this report filed with the town clerk, who's the keeper of all the records of the city of Hartford. So, you know, so whoever comes along will be able to take what you guys have done because it certainly is comprehensive. And seeing the digital work, you know, and putting all that together, as I said, what is it, 900 and something pages. If that could be filed with our town clerk's office, that'd be totally awesome.
Sure.
Okay, open the floor up for questions, comments. Just raise your hands, council members, because I can't see everybody on the screen at one time. Councilman Gale, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Tecton, and the whole team. That is a lot of work that you've just summarized in a half an hour. And there's certainly, as the Council President said, there's a lot to digest there, and it's not like we're going to reach into our back pocket and find $150 million and get this done. But I'm interested as to whether there was an analysis in all of this. Was there an analysis done of the amount of usable space that we're currently using versus the amount of usable space that this might provide upon renovation. I mean, I think some of us have been of the mindset that we're not really making the best use of this building. I don't think we're using the fourth floor right now at all, although we did certainly in years past, there were many departments, including the planning department was up there on the fourth floor. So I'm just wondering, is there any analysis of that in this report?
So the short answer is yes, there is an analysis. The analysis included, so there's some aspects of the proposed work that are going to consume usable floor plate, like vertical shafts for mechanical, some stairwells for egress. So we calculated some usable loss, but we also calculated the use with proper accessibility and various different code compliance. The fourth floor would be added as totally usable. And then we're also looking at, it's called the basement, or I like to call basements, particularly this one, the garden level, making sure that we can maximize the use on both that level and also the fourth floor. So the net add to usable space is there. We can get you the detailed kind of square footage summary for that piece.
Yeah, it might be fun to know, we could get a 10% increase or 25% increase in usable space. And my other question is at $1,145 per square foot for this building, is there what would be the cost to just tear it down and build a brand new building just like this one? If you could, I mean, I don't know if we could find we probably couldn't find the craftsmen and the materials to do it just like this one. But I mean, I know
Come on, John, come on.
well, hang on. I mean, I know, for instance, the legislative office building that went up not so many years ago, is certainly not comparable to the state capitol, but it's a pretty darn nice building with a lot of darn nice materials that were put into it. So I'm not proposing that we tear it down, but I am just interested by comparison, if there is any comparison.
There's no comparison, I don't believe, Councilman.
Let me hear his answer.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Come on, Marilyn, let's,
There, you couldn't replicate this building. Let's say you had an empty site next door. You couldn't replicate this building and all of its character for the cost for that $1,100 a square foot. I know these are eye-popping numbers, but to be quite honest with you, we do a lot of educational work, we'll do a lot of corporate work, ground up new educational work, any type of school every day, all day, is between $1,100 and $1,200 a square foot total project costs. And that's not even historic.
That's for new, you're talking new construction.
New construction.
New construction.
And
okay,
so,
well, that's fair. That's what I wanted to know. I wanted to just have a sense.
So I don't know if you take a step back and you compare this work, the scope of work related to other projects, I don't think it's astronomical outside. You're obviously paying a premium because of the character and the preservation piece. Could you build a new office building for less? Absolutely. But you're not going to have the same benefits that this building does have. So I guess it's a long-winded answer of saying, we've seen other types of buildings that are in that range. We also have seen some projects that you could build for less, but I don't think you're paying such a premium where you should completely discard it at this point, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you, Council President.
Sure. Any other questions, statement? Let me ask, until somebody else get ready. You talked about a little bit of water damage on the fourth and the third floor, I think. Jeff, I think you mentioned. Just the cost of seeing if you can, until the decision is made, whether they're going to spend 150 million or not. And maybe the question should go to Paul. Are we finding some way to fix those water leaks, damage, so the building doesn't keep being run down?
Yes, Chair Surgeon, we have an on-call trusted roofing agent for the city of Hartford that has an open PO that if we were to find any type of infiltration in this building, they would come out and repair that leak immediately. So while you do see the damage in the report, you see the peeling paint, and at one point that column was pretty tricky. It took me and several professionals a considerable amount of time to identify how that water was coming in, but we were able to identify and stop that water from coming in. So there are no active leaks. We spent a considerable amount of money on the skylight system. While we did not replace it for upwards of $1 million, we did spend a few $100,000 to make sure that we resealed every single pane, so no water is coming in through that skylight system anymore. So we're doing with our modest CIP funds, the very best we can to keep this building dry.
Great, thank you, Paul. And I have neglected to thank our city staff, Natasha Rome, for working with DPW and yourself, Paul, in putting this together. So, I just want to thank you for doing so.
You're welcome.
Any questions, concerns, councilperson, any other?
Sure, Council President,
Yeah.
I'll try another one.
Okay,
I don't know, again, I don't know if the report gets into this at all, but I know, from a functional standpoint, one of the things, and the report starts off by saying, City Hall is structurally sound. Buildings in pretty good shape exterior, and that's a great thing. From a functioning standpoint, those of us that are in the building, probably the biggest complaint that everybody has is the air conditioning. That, unfortunately, this building was built before we had, great new systems. And so we've got these window units all over the place. They make noise, they're ugly, they destroy the architectural beauty of the building. And inside, they're not very pleasant to look at either. So is there the ability to break this type of renovation project into various components where, let's say over the next 5 to 10 years, we just wanted to upgrade the mechanicals, and, just go in and deal with that and leave the exterior alone for the moment, focus on getting a better HVAC system in the building. So I'm wondering how we would break it into components in that fashion.
So short answer is yes, you can break the various different aspects of the proposed recommendations into smaller projects. In particular, the mechanical system. Our recommendations are to basically use what's called a VRV system. So it's most are familiar with it in, I guess, residential, where they're kind of up on a ceiling. They're like a split system. So they make a commercial kind of line related to that. So we would use a system like that, but a commercially based. And then what's called a DOAS unit, which is a direct outside air system that would be placed likely in your mezzanine between your glass ceiling and your skylight. So that brings in fresh air. And then this unit, this split system, would be housed in the space, your office right now. And we'd bring in a smaller, what that does is it allows us to use smaller ductwork to bring through the building for fresh air, and then use the split system to either heat or cool the space. So think of it as like you're getting fresh air at a certain temperature, like 55 degrees, and that unit that's going to be above the ceiling, that VRV is going to give you either both heating and cooling. So it takes care of the ventilation for fresh air, takes care of heating, takes care of cooling. That type of project can be implemented kind of outside of all these other components. You would likely want to think about like things like power, making sure you have enough power for those kinds of components, making sure that you have enough vertical space to work through the building. So when you break them into smaller projects, you're probably paying a little bit of a premium just because of you have to do a few extra things because they're smaller projects. But the answer is yes, you can break them down into smaller projects. And we thought we were careful about the proposed recommendations. So, and that particular system that I described it is minimally invasive for a building like this.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair, if I may, Councilman Gale, to go further. So if indeed we did want to get the heating and the cooling situated in the hall, we would certainly want to take the old air conditioners out the window. So now we are doing a little bit of asbestos remediation because these windows are laden with asbestos and lead. Yes, you can do that, get the new mechanicals in the building, but it would dovetail into other items that we would have to do as a part of that project. Some roof replacement to where the direct outside air unit's going to go on. We would want to replace that section of roof certainly before we put any type of unit on the roof. So
I believe
overlap.
Councilman Thomas also had a question.
Yes, thank you so much, Madam President. And I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for the presentation. It was a very nice presentation. I would say I was, similar to Madam President, kind of like a sticker shock with the amount, the 150 million. And I know John Gale, he talked about his pocket, but he has it in the other pocket, more of a front pocket, and he'll bring it for us. But I would say with Hartford coming up on its 400th year anniversary in 2035, so we have 10 years before 400 years. And similar question to kind of John Gale, not necessarily about air conditioners in general, but I would love to maybe see the presentation maybe broken down in ways of like, if you don't want to do all of this, you can maybe think about like doing some of this stuff, like a little bit of this, a little bit of that here, and maybe so it's not like the major sticker shock of 150 million, but maybe it's like, hey, what kind of an investment at this level, where it's 25 million, or investment at 50 million, or an investment at 75 million, and we can kind of see where that brings us, and then we can have a conversation with the powers that be, and talk about if we can make some of those things happen. I would love for us to leave this meeting and say, let's do all of it right now, so we can get the best city hall that our constituents deserve. And I think it's the best city hall in the whole country, to be completely honest, and I've been to a few of them. And it deserves to get spruced up a little bit, but I don't know where $150 million comes from either. But I thank you guys for your presentation, and to Madam President's point as well. I would love for you guys to bring it to the clerk's office as well, so it gets filed correctly, and people can return to it. And I would love for you guys to send it off to us if you can as well. Email, or maybe even some nice hard copies, so we can show people. And maybe even if we get some nice hard copies, they can even be in the offices. So when people come visit us, we can, just show people like, hey, these are the kind of things that we're talking about. So make sure you pay your taxes, and and everything could work out, But that's all I had to say. Thank you so much for your work, and I appreciate you guys. And let's make it happen.
I do have to say that, we have to also make sure that we have a conversation, with the mayor, going forward. So that's why, hopefully, I know you're going to be leaving pretty soon, Paul, is to get the mayor, up to date
Sure.
on this also,
Of course.
so we can have an intelligent discussion. Until I haven't recovered from the sticker shock as yet, so I'm still working on that. Any other questions, comment? Councilwoman Rossetti, you want to close out? You're on mute.
Yeah, I had some other windows open, sorry. First of all, I want to take the opportunity to thank Paul. First of all, I've said that 4 times now. So second of all, Paul, you, through Batterson, through this, you've just been a pleasure to work with. I'm sorry I missed your party. But I will never be able to thank you enough. You will now be at a company where we can really irritate you. So that's kind of nice to know. And I can't thank the folks at Tecton. As my colleague said, it is really, certainly there's sticker shock, but the end product is a masterpiece.
Mhm.
It was a lot to knit together. And it's the start of, I hope in my lifetime, that we are able to accomplish it, because it's a historical building. It's a beautiful building. So many times over the last, 50 years, we knocked down buildings that we wish were still there. And, you know, we'll just see what happens. But this was a team that really worked hard, Paul, Nina, all of you. And that I thank you, Council President, for making suggestion to make it a cow meeting, because I think this is so much better than just having kind of a presentation. It's in the official record. So that's my comments. I will now leave it to my Council President.
Again, I want to thank Paul. I want to thank you for all your years of service with the city and wishing you the best of luck. Jeff, a masterful presentation. Wish it was a state of Connecticut who can stuck away a bunch of monies to get their building renovated. Um, but thank you so very much, Nina, and the whole team. This has been fabulous. It's been great. And it certainly gives us an opportunity to start the discussion. As Councilman Thomas talked about, in the next, number of years, 2035, the building is going to be 400 years old. So this is a beginning conversation that needs to happen, before 2035 rolls around. And your presentation and what all the hard work has been done certainly give us this opportunity to do so. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you very much for attending the meeting, and all the best again, Paul, for your next career move.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate
All
it.
right. Take care. Have a
Thanks,
good
Jeff,
Thank you.
Nina, Paul.
Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Yay.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.